I still remember the day I walked into Jim's auto repair on the corner of Maple and 3rd. It was one of those sweltering summer afternoons where the heat seemed to rise from the asphalt in visible waves. My car had been making this strange rattling noise for weeks, and I'd finally gathered enough courage and funds to have someone take a look at it. The garage doors were wide open, industrial fans spinning furiously in a losing battle against the heat. The air was thick with the smell of motor oil, rubber, and that distinct mechanical scent that all repair shops seem to share. Little did I know that this routine visit would turn into one of those small but memorable life moments that stick with you for reasons you never expect. You know how sometimes the most ordinary encounters can suddenly take an unexpected turn? That's exactly what happened that day. I was just another customer with a problematic vehicle, but what transpired between me and that mechanic became a perfect example of how human connections can form in the most unlikely circumstances and through the most unusual interactions. As I walked into the garage, I immediately noticed him, the mechanic who would soon leave his mark on me, quite literally. He was hunched over the engine of a red pickup truck, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy among the maze of parts. Let me tell you about this guy. He must have been in his mid-50s, with the kind of weathered face that told stories of decades spent under car hoods. His name was Frank. At least that's what the patch on his blue coveralls said. Those coveralls had probably been blue when they were new, but years of grease, oil, and whatever else mechanics encounter had transformed them into a canvas of automotive history. Frank had forearms like Popeye, probably from years of wrestling with stubborn bolts and heavy parts. His hands were massive, with thick fingers and nails that, despite obvious attempts at cleaning, were permanently stained black around the edges. His face was equally memorable, ruddy cheeks, a salt and pepper beard that wasn't quite a beard but more than a 5 o'clock shadow, and laugh lines that suggested he found humor in life's little absurdities. When he noticed me standing there, he straightened up with a slight wince, the telltale sign of someone who spent too many years bending over engines. "Be with you in a sec," he called out, wiping his hands on a red rag that seemed to make them dirtier rather than cleaner. His voice was exactly what you'd expect, gravelly, loud enough to be heard over engine noise, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. I had made certain assumptions about how this interaction would go. In my experience, mechanics often treated customers, especially those who clearly knew nothing about cars, like myself, with a mixture of condescension and impatience. I was prepared for technical jargon designed to confuse me into paying for unnecessary repairs, or that knowing look when I tried to describe the noise my car was making. You know the one, where they seemed to be thinking, "This poor, clueless soul." But Frank immediately defied those expectations. When he finally approached me, wiping his hands on that futile rag, there was no condescension in his eyes, just genuine interest and a warmth that caught me off guard. "What can I do for you today?" he asked, and I felt like he actually wanted to know, not just as a business transaction, but because he genuinely cared about solving problems. I explained about the rattling noise, doing my best impression of it, something like krrr thunk, that made me feel ridiculous but made Frank nod with recognition. "Let's take a listen," he said, gesturing for my keys. As I handed them over, I noticed the thick layer of grease covering his hands despite his efforts with the rag. I made a mental note to wash my keychain later. Frank moved with surprising agility for his size, sliding into the driver's seat of my sedan with practiced ease. He turned the key, and immediately his head tilted slightly, listening with the concentration of a musician tuning an instrument. He revved the engine a few times, his eyes distant as he focused entirely on the sounds. After about 30 seconds, he killed the engine and emerged from the car with a knowing look. "Your timing belt tensioner's going," he said matter-of-factly. "Not dangerous yet, but it'll get worse. Probably start to affect your fuel efficiency soon too." The way he explained it made perfect sense, even to my mechanically challenged brain. He didn't dumb it down exactly, but he translated the car's language into terms I could understand. That's when it happened. The incident that would make this routine car repair memorable. As Frank was explaining what needed to be done and roughly how much it would cost, he became animated, using his hands to illustrate how the tensioner worked. In his enthusiasm, he forgot about the grease coating his fingers. With one particularly emphatic gesture, his hand brushed against my crisp white button-down shirt, leaving behind a perfect black smudge right across my chest. The moment hung between us for a second, his hand still in midair, my eyes fixed on the dark stain now adorning my shirt. I had just come from an important meeting and was heading to lunch with clients afterward. This was not part of my plan for the day. Frank's face underwent a rapid transformation, from animated explanation to horrified realization. "Oh, hell," he muttered, looking genuinely distressed. "I am so sorry about that." He reached for a clean-looking rag from his back pocket. "Let me try to." "It's okay," I said quickly, taking a step back, not wanting to risk making it worse. "Really, it's fine." It wasn't fine, of course. I was annoyed and now had to figure out how to explain this stain to my lunch companions. But something about Frank's mortified expression made me want to ease his guilt. No, it's not okay," he insisted, still holding the rag. "I should have been more careful. I know better than this." The genuine remorse in his voice was disarming. This wasn't the reaction I expected from the stereotypical gruff mechanic I had imagined. What happened next is the part that truly made this encounter unforgettable. In an apparent attempt to demonstrate how sorry he was, Frank reached out and placed his hand on my shoulder in a gesture of apology. "I feel terrible about this," he said earnestly. "I'll pay for the cleaning, of course." It was a nice offer, but there was just one problem. He'd forgotten about the grease again. As he patted my shoulder reassuringly, his hand slid slightly, and I felt the unmistakable cool, slick sensation of motor oil against the side of my neck. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could see in Frank's widening eyes the dawning horror as he realized what he'd done. He'd not only stained my shirt, but had now essentially marked me like some kind of automotive territorial ritual. The absurdity of the situation hit me first. Here I was, standing in an auto shop with grease on my shirt and now my neck, being apologized to by a man who kept accidentally making things worse with each attempt to make them better. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, stomach-hurting laugh that echoed through the garage. Frank looked confused for a split second, then relieved, and then he joined in, his booming laugh drowning out even the industrial fans. The other mechanics in the shop looked over, curious about the commotion, which only made us laugh harder. "I swear," Frank gasped between fits of laughter. "This has never happened before." "Well, the shirt maybe, but not the neck. The neck is a new one. I'm glad I could help you break new ground in your career," I replied, still chuckling as I accepted the clean shop towel he finally managed to offer me. Let me explain why this matters, why this small, messy interaction has stayed with me. In that moment of shared laughter, something shifted. What could have been an unpleasant encounter, a ruined shirt, a frustrated customer, an embarrassed mechanic, transformed into a genuine human connection. The barriers that typically exist between service provider and customer dissolved in the absurdity of the situation. As I dabbed at my neck with the towel, Frank told me about his 30 years as a mechanic, how he'd started as an apprentice right out of high school, and how he still loved solving the puzzle of a troubled engine. I shared a bit about my work too, and we discovered a shared passion for vintage motorcycles, though mine was purely theoretical while he actually restored them in his spare time. The grease incident became our inside joke as he worked on my car. "Don't worry," he called from under the hood. "I'm keeping my distance from anything white or clean." When another customer came in wearing a pristine white golf shirt, Frank shot me a conspiratorial glance that had me stifling another laugh. This encounter got me thinking about the intersection of humor and frustration in our everyday lives. How often do we let small annoyances, a stained shirt, a minor inconvenience, dictate our mood and our interactions with others? In a different mindset, I might have been angry about the stain, might have demanded compensation or left negative reviews online. I might have missed out on the connection that formed in that moment of shared laughter. There's something powerful about finding humor in life's little mishaps. It's not just about looking on the bright side or forcing positivity. It's about recognizing the inherent absurdity that exists in so many of our daily interactions. When we can laugh at these moments together, we create bridges between our separate experiences. I think about how many meaningful connections we might miss because we're too wrapped up in our expectations or too focused on minor inconveniences. If I had been too concerned about my shirt, I would have missed learning about Frank's fascinating journey as a mechanic, his passion for problem solving, and his genuine care for his customers' safety on the road. The garage itself became a different place to me after that interaction. What I had initially seen as just a utilitarian space, noisy, dirty, somewhat intimidating, revealed itself as a place where real craftsmanship happened. As Frank worked on my car, explaining what he was doing in that straightforward way of his, I gained a new appreciation for the skill and knowledge required to understand the complex systems that we take for granted every day. You might be wondering how the car repair turned out. The timing belt tensioner was indeed the problem, just as Frank had diagnosed within seconds of hearing it. He replaced it efficiently, charged me exactly what he had estimated, which was less than I had feared, and even took the time to show me a couple of basic maintenance checks I could do myself between services. But the repair itself isn't really the point of this story. What stays with me is the reminder that human connections can form anywhere, even, or perhaps especially, in moments of imperfection. There was something wonderfully authentic about that interaction, grease stains and all. No pretense, no carefully maintained professional distance. Just two people finding unexpected common ground in an awkward situation. I've thought a lot about why this particular encounter has stayed with me when so many other service interactions blur together in memory. I think it's because it was so tactile, so physical, literally marked on my clothing and skin. The grease stain was like a physical manifestation of the messiness of human connection, how it doesn't always follow the neat, clean script we might prefer. In our increasingly digital world, where so many of our interactions are mediated through screens, there was something refreshingly real about this encounter. You can't digitize a grease stain. You can't fully capture the spontaneous eruption of shared laughter in a text message or email. Some experiences still need to happen in person, with all the unpredictable elements that entails. I ended up going to my lunch meeting with the faint remnants of grease on my neck, despite my best efforts with the shop towel. When one of my clients asked about it, I told them the story, and to my surprise, it became an icebreaker that shifted our previously formal relationship to something more genuine. The grease stain became a conversation starter, a human moment in what would otherwise have been a strictly professional interaction. That's another thing I've reflected on since this happened, how sharing our small mishaps and imperfections often opens doors with others. There's something disarming about admitting to being in a slightly ridiculous situation. It gives others permission to be human too, to step out from behind their professional facades. I went back to Jim's auto repair a few months later when my car needed an oil change. Frank recognized me immediately. "Hey, it's the shirt guy," he called out with a grin. "Don't worry, I've been practicing my non-contact car repair techniques." The fact that he remembered me, that our brief interaction had made an impression on him too, reinforced the significance of these small human connections. This time, I wore a dark blue shirt, which Frank noticed and appreciated with a thumbs up. "Smart man," he said, learning from experience. But I noticed he was still careful to keep his distance from my clothing, making an exaggerated show of keeping his hands to himself that had us both laughing again. In many ways, Frank the mechanic has become a metaphor in my mind for life's little surprises. Those unexpected moments that might initially seem like inconveniences, but often contain hidden gifts. The grease stain was literally an unwanted mark, something that didn't belong on my clean shirt or my neck. But metaphorically, it became a mark of connection, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful interactions come when we least expect them and in forms we might not immediately recognize as valuable. I've tried to carry this lesson forward in other areas of my life, to be more open to the unexpected, to find humor in imperfection, to look for connection in unlikely places. When things don't go according to plan, I try to ask myself, is there a Frank the mechanic moment happening here? Is there an opportunity for authentic connection hiding behind this apparent mishap? It's a small shift in perspective, but it's made a difference in how I navigate the world. I'm more likely now to strike up conversations with strangers, to laugh at myself when things go awry, to see the potential for meaningful exchange in everyday interactions that I might previously have rushed through on autopilot. The grease stain eventually came out of my shirt, thanks to the miracle of modern stain removers. But in a way, I'm glad it happened. That small moment of messiness opened the door to a genuine human connection that I still value. It reminds me that life isn't meant to be pristine and perfect. It's meant to be lived with all its unpredictable, occasionally greasy, interactions. So the next time someone accidentally leaves their mark on you, literally or figuratively. Maybe pause before reacting. There might be an unexpected connection waiting to be formed, a moment of shared humanity hiding behind what first appears as a simple mistake. Sometimes the most memorable connections come with a little bit of mess attached. And sometimes, just sometimes, a mechanic wiping grease on your shirt and then on your neck isn't the disaster it appears to be. It's the beginning of a story worth telling. Total_char_count, 13,642.